Follow Jimmy on Twitter at Jimmy Mathis Show or email Jimmy at jmathis@wbal.com.
Steve Stone in studio, Act 2 of Round and Round. We were talking about this last week. Steve, how was your vacation, by the way?
My vacation was great.
Good.
It was wonderful.
Went down to Texas,
Went
right?
down to Texas, where I got used to the warm weather before it hit here in Baltimore. So
Doesn't make Maryland look so bad when it comes to illegal immigration, does it?
Texas? No,
Yeah.
no. Well, you talk about Rick Perry is doing all he can, that fine Republican governor and the man that could have been president for about, an hour and a half?
Who
or 2
cares
hours?
about all three government agencies?
He does.
Yes.
He's going to cut, yeah.
Anyway, we were talking the Federal Aviation Administration hitting pause on a high-profile sequestration cut. It announced yesterday it would delay previously planned closures of 149 air traffic control towers at small airports, including 5 here in Maryland, the largest one being Martin State Airport. This is while it tries to resolve, quote-unquote, multiple legal challenges to the decision. Either they have to shut the towers down or they don't, right?
So what's waiting a month and a half going to change that? Now, part of this, what I read, was also part of the delay is because some of these regional airports are actually offering to pony up the money to pay to keep the towers open. So I guess they're having to figure out how to, I don't know, I guess you can't just write a check to the FAA. But
I thought it was interesting. The point that I was trying to make on this last week when Brian Sears was in studio is the rhetoric behind this is it's going to cause commercial delays. It's going to interfere with commercial travel.
And if I remember the show 2 weeks ago, when you really went into detail on this, that is not the case.
No, of course not. And you don't have commercial planes going into Martin State Airport or into Frederick. There may be, I think Easton was tied into this, or maybe 1 or 2 going into Easton. Now, the manager of Baltimore Washington International, who is also the manager of Martin's, is the one that was sort of spewing this line here. His justification on why it was going to interfere with BWI is all the corporate jet traffic that goes into Martin's would then would overflow into BWI. There's not that much traffic coming into Martin's. What I thought was interesting about Martin's on this is the fact that the Maryland Air National Guard is based there.
Right.
And the point I was trying to make on this last week, Martin's tower isn't a 24-hour tower. They close down overnight. And a lot of small airports, regional airports across the country, are non-controlled towers.
Right.
I don't know. I thought that I just thought the posturing in this was offensive to me. When they were originally talking about shutting down air traffic control towers and furloughing people, I really thought they were going to do it at the international airports to cause the delays and have the long lines and to show the pain.
I can tell you, having just flown last week, no long lines. No long lines at the major airports. But really, you make a delay like this, and what I found is what they're really hoping for by delaying it is people just stop talking about it. And then they can go ahead and do it, and it'll be like it never happened.
You look at the budget with the FAA, Steve. They don't. I mean, towers and air traffic controllers, people that work at traffic centers. It doesn't need to be where the cuts are made on this.
Well, and
it's a massive.
2% is what, $600 million they have to cut. Is that the correct number? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, out of $83 billion.
Right. I mean, the overall budget's huge, but $600 million is not chump change either.
No, it's not. A record almost 90 million Americans were not in the labor force in March, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That is an increase of 663,000 Americans who were not in the labor force in January. Since President Barack Obama was first inaugurated back in 2009, almost 10 million people have dropped out of the labor workforce. We haven't really talked about the unemployment numbers in a while. Steve, I mean, I know that you dismiss this, but we're talking about 90 million people out of 300 million that live in this country that are no longer participating.
How do they count that? I mean, are your daughters part of that 90 million?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yes, and so is the senior that's 105 years old.
Right. So you've got a lot of people who aren't even eligible to be in the workforce. I mean, your daughter, being your daughter, is work enough. I'm sure you should be paying her for that.
Correct.
But, so that's a huge number. Yes, it makes huge headlines, and you get one bad job reports, and people want to talk about it. But you really have to break. What does that number mean?
Well, it means that it's the lower workforce participation since 1979. Oh, it means it means that the 7 point. What's the official number? I
think it was 7.6. 7.6 is what they announced.
It's a complete fallacy.
And you and I have always agreed on that the official number is not the official number. And you want to know what? even if the official number was 2 and you don't have a job, it doesn't matter because your personal unemployment rate is 100%, and that's all that matters.
Well, right now, some 15% of U.S. residents receiving food stamps. This number is up 23% in Washington, D.C. Well, this comes back to what is, I just find that what has become an acceptable, normal quality of life in America is as acceptable as it is to American citizens. I mean, I don't,
well, we're going to continue to disagree on that, too. So I don't think it's if you think it's easy being on food stamps, then go try it. Go try living on $6 a day and feed your family.
I don't think it's easy, but I also don't.
But you're saying they think it's easy. You're saying they think it's acceptable.
No, what I'm saying is I'm not seeing outrage from the 50 million people that need to rely on supplemental food assistance just to get by.
What sort of outrage do you want to see?
When you have 1 in 6 Americans,
what's the outrage?
You know what? I would think so. If you have people starving, Steve, I would think that they'd be marching on Washington.
So I'm starving, so I'm going to go to Washington to march to show my outrage.
Oh, you're going to love this one. In a staggering case of affirmative action gone wild, officials in a major U.S. city are actually recruiting minorities to be lifeguards at public pools, even if they're not good swimmers. Yep. And it's all in the name of diversity.
It's kind of like recruiting me and you to be firemen, right? It's like not a good not a good idea.
No, but the reason
I'm not sure.
This is a true story. This is a true story.
I thought it was a fake story when I first read this.
I thought it was a fake story too. I had to look into. I'm like, there's no way that this could be right. The city official.
What city is it? Do we know?
Hold on, I should know.
I mean, random city in America. I mean,
hold on a second. I'll find it in a second. The argument is because the public pools, the majority of the swimmers
are Hispanic,
are Hispanic, and also African American, and there's a language barrier. So
hold it. If you're pulling someone out of a pool to keep them from drowning, are you actually like having a conversation with them? Or
I'm pretty sure if you're drowning, even if you're not able to scream, "I'm drowning," isn't there some sort of universal sign language?
The waving of the hands, the spitting of the water.
I researched it twice because I was like, "There's no way this could be a true story."
Yeah, I did too, but we really need to find out what city it is. I'm curious.
Let's go to Craig in Baltimore talking the jobs number. Craig, how you doing?
Yeah, you said the number of people out of the labor participation has gone up, and if that includes every man, woman, and child living in the country, then the number the percentage is even higher because there are fewer and fewer children being born in this country. So there are fewer and fewer children young people who wouldn't be in the job market anyway. And the demographic is shifting upward age-wise. So that compounds the number of people who aren't in the job force.
Well, true, Craig. And the other point to this is it's not that they're changing the methodology on the way that they calculate these numbers. I mean, this is the way that they've always been calculated. So, we're comparing apples to apples.
But it's a government number, though, and government numbers overall, what do they mean?
Well, it's just that there are fewer jobs. And about the growing number of people with food stamps, and the way that that's becoming acceptable, it's becoming acceptable because I guess people are becoming more used to the idea that fewer people can work, that the government has destroyed the economy and is continually destroying what's left of the economy so that there are fewer jobs.
And Craig, that's the point that I was trying to make. It's just what's acceptable these days.
Right. And that's where the outrage should be, that the taxation. I mean, Maryland, for instance, which is a microcosm, and I think has become a model for what the federal. I want to make a bumper sticker. Obama is Marxist socialism. O'Malley is Marxist socialism on steroids, which is alluding to the fact that he thinks he's a big tough guy. Because that's what's happened. If Obama likes every tax he ever sees, O'Malley loves every tax he ever sees.
Not going to argue that with you.
I was surprised that they didn't try to blame this on the sequestration.
Give it a month.
And it hasn't. I mean, the sequestration really hasn't kicked in much.
Right, and they say it's going to cut a half a point out of GDP and cost 750,000 jobs.
I mean,
which is fine. You can't cut that much money and not lose jobs, right?
Yeah, but but for every dollar that's spent on a government job, I mean, that takes out far more out of the economy for the real world.
But those aren't just government jobs are private sector jobs too.
They're contracted. They're jobs in the private sector that actually work for the government. If you work for a government contractor, you are indirectly working. You're working for the government removed one level.
Correct.
You're still working for the government. You're still a government employee by proxy.
Thank you, Craig. Have a great weekend. I appreciate the phone call. Phoenix, Arizona.
Yes. Home of John McCain?
Well, yeah. And
non-President John McCain's home is doing this.
Swimming is not necessarily a qualification for employment. We can work with you on your swimming skills.
Jeez.
As long as you can communicate, okay?
Right, yeah.
Swim, a lifeguard. We can work with that. Just
agua. See? that's the whole interview process.
Steve Stoden in studio. We'll continue round and round on the other side of the break. A lot going on today. Stephen Brill from Time Magazine joining me at 8:30, talking about his piece in Time Magazine about why the cost of health care is so staggering. Also, Professor Richard Vatz in studio at 9 o'clock. It's 7:45. You're listening to The Jimmy Mathis Show on WBAL and WBAL.com.
The Jimmy Mathis Show on WBAL Radio, the only station that matters. You spin me right round, baby, right round, like a record, baby, right round, round, round. You spin me right round, baby, right round, like a record, baby, right round, round, round. All right, Steve, the Maryland House of Delegates has approved a bill that would allow people with an unlawful immigration status to continue to obtain a driver's license. This bill was approved by a vote of 82 to 56. The bill now goes to the Senate, which has already approved similar legislation. Delegates gave preliminary approval to the bill on Thursday. If passed, the bill would make the existing driver's license provision for immigrants living in the country without permission permanent. Had State Senator Victor Ramirez on the program last week, co-sponsor the bill. Also, he was instrumental in the
Dream Act.
in the State Dream Act, which obviously survived the referendum process. It comes back to, first of all, the logic behind this is absolute lunacy. Somehow the thinking that supporters of this,
what's their thinking? I was out of town all week.
It's highway safety. Because by illegals having driver's licenses,
is it safety or is it just the fact that insurance?
Safety. I don't see the parallel between the two. Well, and they've also got to go take a driving test because I guess that's a new novel idea in the state of Maryland. They got to take a driver's test before they let you behind the wheel. But that you'll be able to get insurance, and everybody is reciting this fact. But somehow, if you don't have insurance, you're 5 times more likely to be involved in a automobile accident.
Really? That doesn't make sense to me. Does it make sense to you? Insurance, non-insurance. You're a good driver. You're a bad driver. But see, I don't necessarily support this. It gets back to kind of what we talked about border security before at the beginning of the show. Is if you're not going to deport these 11 to 30 million people, whatever the number is,
right?
What are you going to do with them? And I don't necessarily think this is the answer. But are you just going to keep them here and make sure they're miserable? Are you going to become a sanctuary city like Baltimore is becoming and hope you can rebuild your city on their backs?
Well, that's the point I was making.
What do you do? Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, that's the point I was making last week. I mean, we have navigated away from
I wasn't listening last week.
From WBAL.com, Steve. You can listen in the DFW. We've gone from a sanctuary state to now a mayor who has a philosophy of repopulating the city on the backs of illegals. Right. And look, there's been a mass exodus out of Baltimore City for the last decade plus because of, it is what it is, because of a poor quality of life. And I know you are a city resident.
Right.
I was in the past. I lived down on Federal Hill. You go 2 blocks over, you're in a war zone. I had my house broken into, my car broken into, people urinating on the porch. Did I fear for my life every time I walked out? No. But you know what? It was
not a pleasant experience.
It wasn't a pleasant experience. And if I am a young, affluent, married guy that's trying to find out where I'm going to raise my family, I got to be honest with you, which I'm none of those things.
I was about to say
but Baltimore City isn't going to be my first choice. And
no.
And the problem is they're not able to really promote the city the way they need to attract young, affluent couples. Well, so how are they repopulating on the back of illegal immigrants?
And the property taxes are much higher. And, when you say I live in the city, I'm inside the city limits. I'm not downtown.
And I live downtown.
Yeah, I know. I mean, so my neighborhood's kind of nice, but you're right. When I have people visit, I don't go to the Inner Harbor. I don't go to Fells. I don't take them to those places because, like you say, it's not pleasant.
Well, and the politicians are bringing up the terrorism threat. You can't use this license. It's only for driving. It's only for state purposes. You can't enter a federal building with it. You can't board a plane. The point that I was making last week, and again, Steve, I don't agree with this, but if we're going to afford the segment of the population basically all of the rights that natural-born citizens have, at what point? Because the line that gets blurred here is the difference between residency and citizenship.
Right.
At what point, and this has been floated around in other states and in other counties, not in Maryland yet, but at what point are you going to start to afford residents the right to work or the right to vote? Because part of what you need in order to obtain this driver's license is you have to prove, or at least backfiled, 2 years of income taxes. And in the past, when we were talking about taxes, when it came to illegal immigrants, the argument was always they're paying regressive taxes.
They're paying
sales tax, gas tax, sin taxes. Now we're getting to the point where they actually need to prove that they have paid income tax, or at least they're backfiling their income taxes. If they're paying income taxes, they're paying the regressive taxes. We have a state that is repopulating its city on the back of illegal immigrants. We're not going after the employer. At what point do you start to have the conversation about giving them voting rights? And I'm not saying I agree with that.
Well, I don't agree with that either. You're right. There's a big difference between residency and citizenship, and I think this is one of the angles that Rubio is trying to go down. But then you risk also creating a entirely second class of citizen. I don't know. It's not the thing with immigration. There's just no easy answer because it was ignored for so long.
But that's the point
As
I was
you
making.
said before, Republicans want them for work,
for cheap labor,
and Democrats hope they can get them for votes.
But the second class of citizen aspect is what I was talking to State Senator Victor Ramirez about. If the whole thing is to bring them out of the shadows and not have a second class of people, by definition, this driver's license is a second class of people. If you can't enter a federal building and you can't board a plane, I'm not saying you should be able to do those things, but it's a second class of people.
I agree.
Down in Annapolis, they've been busy beavers down there.
They have been. What else have they done while I've been gone, Jimmy Mathis?
Well, something that they didn't do in their 90-day legislative session last year, they passed a state budget.
Really?
Yes.
No special session for that, huh?
No, $37 billion.
And what did Martin O'Malley tell us when he ran for governor last time? That he's cut the budget.
He has cut it.
And what did it start out at when he first came in office?
28 billion.
And the 37 billion more or less? Because I went to a public school, so I'm not sure. I'm thinking 37 billion. I'm going to take a flyer, say it's more.
What, they don't teach O'Malley math in the public school system?
They not in the Texas public school system.
Real quick before you go, and I'm really going to be jumping into the gun issue after the 8 o'clock news, but a significant piece of legislation that got through was the gun control bill. This obviously was cornerstone of what O'Malley was trying to get through. And look, he's got a lot of wins right now. He got his gas tax increase. He got his gun legislation, something that
he has wind. He has windmills.
He's got windmills. The repeal of the death penalty. I'm not being facetious. Got the budget passed. That's not going into multiple special sessions. This on the heels of gay marriage last time, the Maryland State DREAM Act last time. He's got his physical issues and he's got his social issues.
He's setting himself up, and he's checked off all the right boxes. And some of those things I agree with, some of them I don't agree with. I guess the bottom line for me is I'm not sure he's sincere about any of them, other than here's my checklist. I did it. I can now run for president. Well,
it's an important checklist because you look at how much importance the president has put on gun legislation. Can't get it out of the Senate right now, and I don't think.
No, I'm not. I don't think it is going to come out of the Senate. Do you?
No, I don't. And what I'm going to jump into after the 8 o'clock news, an article in the Wall Street Journal, Steve. This isn't being talked about. There actually more states are passing legislation easing gun laws. They're making them more restrictive, and nobody's talking about it.
I would not have guessed that.
Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Good to be back.
I'll see you next week. Taking your phone calls, 410-467-WBAL. Toll-free long distance is 1-800-767-WBAL. Verizon star sign WBAL. AT&T pound sign WBAL. Really want to spend the next half hour talking about gun legislation, gun control on the federal level, and more importantly, here in the state of Maryland.